We are on Daf Kuf Amid Beis. Oh, this is a fun Amid. Looks short, but we do places here. Don't forget that. All right. Okay. So we learned yesterday, we ended off with this halacha from Shmuel that if you are in the middle of a Suda on Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tov, so he says the halacha is not like Rav Yehuda, not like Rav Yossi, Ela Peiris Mapu Mekadesh. In the middle of the meal, you take a map, a cloth, you cover the table, and you make Kiddush. You cover the Challah, you make Kiddush. So the Gemara asked, Rav Tachlifa Bar Zim, he said in the name of Shmuel, Kishem Shemafsikin LaKiddush, Kach Mafsikin LaHavdalah. The same way you're mafsik for Kiddush, you have to do the same thing for Havdalah, which means that just like he holds Shabbos is Kaveya, that you'd have to stop to make Kiddush. So the same thing is true for Havdalah. If you're in the middle of Shalosh Shudas, and if it gets dark, you'd have to stop the Shalosh Shudas and make Havdalah. So the Gemara says, "My mafsikin." What does it mean by mafsikin? Lav akir shulchan. Doesn't it mean that you take away the shulchan and you make and you say berachas hamazon? So this is the lashon mafsik sounds like akir shulchan, not just being paris mapo and mekadesh. The Gemara answers, "Loi." It means lemapa. You could just cover the table. That means paris mapo and mekadesh. Okay, that's what we learned yesterday. Taisus points out that Rav disagrees with this statement of Shmuel when it comes to Havdalah, and he holds that Havdalah is not Kaveya, and therefore if you started a Suda before, you're allowed to continue your Shalosh Shudas after nightfall. You don't have to stop to make Havdalah. That's what Taisus lets us know. Terrific. Okay. Now we get another Gemara. We'll see it's a machlokes if it's a hemshach or it's a new Gemara. Let's say a story. Here we go. Rabba bar Rav Huna, Ikla lebei Reish Galusa. So Rabba bar Rav Huna, he went to spend some time by the Reish Galusa. And the Kiddush, it seems like it was Erev Shabbos. And Kiddush means that it turned tonight. Now, I'm sorry, I skipped the line there. Let's try this again. Aisutaka. There we go. Aisutaka means they brought the table, Hameh in front of him. Haras mappa, he spread over a mappa the Kiddush and he made Kiddush. That's the story with Rabbi Rav Huna. So Taisus and Rashbam both say, just look at the Taisus, it's easier. He says, Bahascholas Suda Airi, Kedapir Rashbam. We're talking about a new Suda. Right? This was not like they were in the middle of a meal and then Shabbos came in and there was Paris Mappa. This is normal. They were sitting and eating. They went to shul. They came home. They sat down. They brought out the table, and then he was Paris Mappa, and then he made Kiddush. Rashi does say otherwise. That's what the Rashbam and Taisus say. Now, why did they do this? Why did he cover the? Why was he Paris Mappa before he made Kiddush? What's the point of that? Okay, so we have here three reasons in the Rishonim why he was Paris Mappa, why he covered the Mappa, and what did he cover? Okay, Rashbam learns that he covered the bread. He covered the bread with a challah cover, and then he made Kiddush. What's the reason for that? Why did he do that? Because he wanted the food, he wanted to do it l'kavod Shabbos. Let's just take one more look at the brisa. Let's go before we see that inside. Take a look at the brisa the Gemara brings. Tani Nam Yachi. We have a brisa that says the similar idea that Rabbi bar Rav Huna just related. She'ein mevi'in es hashulchan. When you start your meal, you shouldn't bring the table in. Remember, we're talking about everybody had their own tables. All right? So don't bring the table in. El imkain Kiddush, unless you made Kiddush. So the first thing you're supposed to do is make Kiddush. Then you bring the table in. Vim hevi, if you already brought the table in, so now Peiris Hamapa, now you got to cover over the table, Umekadosh, and you got to make Kiddush. So what's the reason for this? Why can't you have why can't you do this? Let me ask you a question before that, before we get into why you have to be Paris Mappa. But maybe some of you are familiar with a Gemara in Shabbos that says that when you come home, we sing Shalom Aleichem on Friday night. Who are we welcoming to the house? We welcome the Malachim. Who's these Malachim? So Gemara says, 2 Malachim escort you home on Friday night. And if they come into your house and they see that the table is set, they give you a bracha. The table's set, the candles are lit, and the beds are made. They give you a bracha that this should be like you should have this next week as well. And the other malach is maybe the Yitzhak and the Yitzhar. The other one has to answer amen to the bracha. And if they find that it wasn't set, then you get the other way. But what is the table set? What do you mean you're supposed to have the table set? You're not supposed to have the table set until after you make Kiddush. So how are you supposed to come in home and how are you supposed to come home and have the table set? What am I supposed to do here? Here the Gemara says you don't set the table until after you make Kiddush. And the Gemara there says you got to have the table set by the time you come home, the table set. That's Taisus' kasha. Taisus answers. This is the Taisus she'en Ravinas Shulchan Elam Kam Kiddush. That's Taisus' kasha. So his teretz is that it was Aruch b'makam acher. You got to have the table set up, ready to go in. It's like like the wedding halls, right? The Teres Avram. Right, the tables are all set. Once the chuppah is over, they take the walls down and you bring them in. That's the way it's supposed to be. Table set up in the one room, ready to go. The malachim see the table, gavalik. You make kiddush, and then you bring the tables in. That's what Taisus says. It says Taisus. If you look at the Taisus, it's like halfway down. The akshav shulchana shalanu shem gedalim yaser. We have big tables. You're not busy carrying tables into the dining room. We have big tables. The kasha Kiddush. You can't bring the tables in after you make Kiddush. He has a halachic problem. Because you're not supposed to be mafsik between you making Kiddush and starting your Suda. So if we're going to have to start bringing in these big tables, that's going to be a big to-do. So he says, therefore, anu regilin lifreis mappa ulakadosh. We lechatchila are peiris mappa, and then we make Kiddush. Then we do that lechatchila. On the bread. I mean, the table's already set, and then we cover the bread and we make it. So why do you have to cover the bread?
Our minhag is because the table is really supposed to be in the other room, so we cover the bread.
Well, that's not correct. I mean, that's what the halach is of imhevi. The halach always is. If you already brought the tables in before you make Kiddush, then you got to be peiris mappa. You got to cover the table over. Now we get into why. What's the Indian here? Why are we trying to cover the tables? All right, why are we covering the table?
Not the same reason we covered yesterday, meaning when we interrupted.
We'll see. Okay, says it like this. So let's continue in the Taisus. This is the last skinny line in Taisus. Here's the first reason we have why you're supposed to cover the tables. Kihechi the teisi seudasa biyakra de shapta. In order that you bring in the food out covered Shabbos. We want this Suda to be a Shabbosdik Suda. So how do you make a Shabbosdik Suda? Well, first you got to make it Shabbos. So you say Kiddush. Now you bring the food into a Shabbos Suda. So kihechi the teisi sudasa. In order to bring the food in, b'yakra de shabta. Yakra means covered of Shabbos. That the food should be brought in al covered Shabbos. So we want to have the table could be set, but we want the food to be covered, or the food to be in a different room, and only bring the food in after you make Kiddush. It seems like here that having the table set doesn't just mean with your cutlery. It means that your table is set with food on it. And then you're supposed to cover over, and now ideally it's in the kitchen or it's somewhere else, and then after you make Kiddush, you bring the food in. The Rashbam seems to say that the Iker Indian is on the Challah, is on the Lechem. That you have the Lechem means the table is set, means you, besides having the table set, but you have the Lechem on it, and therefore you cover over the Lechem. This way, now, what's the idea of covering the Lechem? Because I really don't want it in front of me. It should really not be brought in yet. but we want to have but to have the table set in front of us, so it needs to have the lechem on it. So we cover it over, and now that I covered it, it's as if it's not here. Oh, and then you make Kiddush, then you can uncover it, and now the Suda is brought l'kavod Shabbos.
You don't need it right there.
According to this reason, you would not, according to the shoulders, the bread does not need to be there for Kiddish's sake. Correct. Ideally, the table is set in the kitchen in a different room, and after you make Kiddush, you bring everything in. But being that we have to have the table set, and part of having the table set is having the bread on it, so therefore you're gonna have to cover for Kiddush, since you're just, it's not a halacha in Kiddush, correct? According to the shoulders, having the bread there is not a halacha in Kiddush. What?
You don't need it right there. If you really wanted, you can keep the bread and all the food in another room.
And the table. I'm saying there's a side point is that having the table set requires the bread on it. Table set doesn't just mean having the cutlery or the silverware on it. It means that you're ready to eat. The food's on it. All right. So that's the first reason we have. It's called Yakra de Shabta. It's covered Shabbos. Second reason, Taisus continues, V'yesh mefarish. Others say the reason why we are Paris Mappa is Zecher Leman. This has nothing to do with Akiras HaShulchan or moving the table away. This has to do with the Zecher to the Man. It wouldn't fall on Shabbos. Taisus holds Yom Tov as well. V'hayatal milmala ulamata. When the man fell, there was covered on bottom and top. V'aman beitayim, the man was in between it. So you want to cover the challahs as a zecher to the man. That's the concept of being Paris Mappa umekadish. A din in man, in zecher to the shtei lechem. Okay? The Rush is not on the page here. The Rush brings a third reason. He actually brings it from the Yerushalmi. Kabbalah and Sanal said he couldn't find the Yerushalmi, but he brings from the Yerushalmi the reason that which most people know. The reason why you cover the challah is because when you have a hamaitzi and a hagafen, the halacha is hamaitzi comes first. But being that we have to say Kiddush first, so therefore we cover the challah to make it as if it's not there, and therefore I can make Kiddush first. Okay, that's the three reasons the lashon the Risham uses, that the lechem shouldn't see its busha. It shouldn't be embarrassed by you being mocked in something else before it. But the point is that you cover it, it makes it as if it's not there, and then you can say Kiddush. Great. These are three reasons for the priest's mappa umekadish.
If the challahs are not there,
One second, we'll get there. 1 second. Now, I want to share with you here 7 nafkaminas between these reasons. This I saw in the Sefer Dvar Yaakov, who I was able to work for. I worked under him. He was the Shalom Meshiv in Kol Torah when I was a Shalom Meshiv in Kol Torah. He was the chief Shalom Meshiv. I was the young Shalom Meshiv. The Dvar Yaakov is a very, very popular sefer. Very popular sefer. He writes more on the prakim that they don't learn be'in. It's like more on the Bekiyastik Sfarim. So his name is Rav Yaakov Steinhaus. So he brings 7 nafkaminas between these different reasons. So I'm going to go through them. Here we go. Number 1. What do you have to cover? Where does the cover have to be? You notice Taisus said that if you're doing a zeichel aman, the man was covered on the bottom and on top. So if we want to get the reason of zeichel aman, this should really be covered on the bottom and top. And I've seen people put down a napkin. They put that. Well, maybe that's what our challah board is for. We have a challah board and we have a cover on top. Maybe that suffices. I've seen people put down like a napkin under the challah, put the challah on top of it, and cover it to be a zeichel aman. According to the other reasons, I'm sorry.
The mop on the tablecloth and the tablecloth itself would not suffice to.
I don't know. If you put it on the tablecloth, that would probably work. He also brings down an Ali Rabbi, I think, who says that it should be white. Your towel cover should be white, because like the towel that covered the mun was white. Okay, first nafkamina. Number 2, when does this have to be done? According to the reason of Yakra de Shabsa, we're doing it l'kavod Shabbos. So it's an Indian really of like a because you're making Kiddush, you're making the Suda. You want to first make Kiddush and then bring in the food. It's an Indian of Kavod Shabbos. That would only be possible. That would only be Nageya. That would only apply to Leil Shabbos. But according to that reason, you wouldn't have to do it for the next two meals. Okay. According to the third reason was you're doing it that shouldn't be any busha, that because you're making kid, you're having making a bracha on wine first. Well, that doesn't apply by Challah Shudas. By Challah Shudas, you don't make a bracha on wine. So according to that reason, by Challah Shudas, you shouldn't have to cover the challahs. Okay. How long do the challahs need to be covered for? Okay. Well, according to the reason that you're doing it to bring in the food l'kavod Shabbos, so you got to finish making Kiddush first. After you make Kiddush, then you can uncover the challah. According to the reason that you're doing it, according to the reason that you're doing it, zecher l'man. So if it's zecher to the man, so it should be until after you make hamaitzi, because the zecher to the man is the shtei alechem. So if you're doing it for a zecher to the man, it should be till after hamaitzi. Meaning,
You gotta have the knife on the bread.
I've seen people do. They either, if they want to make a little mark, then they keep the challah covered. They lift up the challahs while they're covered, and then they take it off and they cut the bread afterwards. That is if it's mamash zeichel, that's when it should be covered too. And if it's just an issue with the bari priyagafen, then technically during Kiddush, after you make the bari priyagafen, you can undercover the challahs. Okay. But that wouldn't work for the other reasons. Good. Another nafkamina, I'm sorry, I have 6 nafkaminas. The other one is, what about Yantif? So you notice Tesa said that the man didn't fall on Shabbos and Yantif. That's not so pashut. The big machlekes if the man fell on Yantif. If you held that the man didn't fall on Yantif, so then there would be no need to, according to the reason that you're covering the challahs because of Zeichel man, then on Yantif, if you hold that the man didn't fall on Yantif, there'd be no need to cover the challahs on Yantif. Lamaisa, we're chashish for all these reasons. Many, I think so. We, I don't know, whatever. We try to get as many of those as we can when we cover the challahs. That's it. Those are some nafkaminas between these 7 reasons. Gewaldik. Now, we also mentioned here, when we started, that when did the story of Rabbi Rav Huna take place? So we assumed, Taisa said that this was a regular Friday night. They were coming home from shul, and then they brought in the table, and he covered the challah, he covered it up because they already brought the tables in. Okay. That makes a lot of sense to say pshat like that, because the brisa that it brings as a tani nami hachi, also she'en mevinas hashulchan elam ken kiddush v'mehevi perisim apam makadosh, is not talking about where you're already eating. It's talking about what you're supposed to do on a regular Friday night. So that brisa makes sense. Why we bring that as a raya if we're talking about Haschalas Suda, starting a Suda on Friday night. But as David mentioned, Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi learns that we're talking about on you're already eating on Erev Shabbos. And he actually talks about Pesach. Ein mevinas hashulchan be'erev Pesach afil mi ba'od yom elam kem kiddush. All right. But he's talking about this sugya of Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, Ikul Bereish Kalusa, is talking about where you were already eating, and then they brought the table, and he was Peres Mappa. So the shaila is, so what is the raya to? What's the raya? If that was the story, so why are we bringing a regular brisa of being Peres Mappa Makadosh? Like, what does one thing have to do with the other? All right. So the idea is that we're showing that being Peres Mappa Umekadosh makes it as if it's not around. That's the idea, not the Zeichel Aman pshat. But according to the pshat, that we're doing it either because, like the Yerushalmi said, to cover over the because you really have to make a hamaitzi first. So why are you covering the challah? Because once you cover it, it's like it's not there. Or when you're bringing it liyakra the Shabbos, so for covered Shabbos, covering it is once I cover it, that's as if it's not around anymore. Oh, if it's not around, so then that should suffice for me to that should be considered enough of a hefsek in my suda that I should be able to now start again. The one, great, that one, there you go. Excellent. Okay. Let's go weiter. Okay. Mar continues. Now, Tani Chada. This goes back to our machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi, we had a machlokes about starting, if you're allowed to start on Erev Shabbos, a Suda, Samach Lamincha. Says the Gemara, Tani Chada. We learned in one brisa, Shavin. Both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi agree, She'ein Maschilin, that you do not start the Suda. The Tani Idach, we learned in a different brisa, Shavin Shemaschilin. They both agree that you're allowed to begin a Suda. So these are two brises. Gemara wants to know, what are we talking about here? Bishlam the Tanya Shavin. I understand the brisa that says that they agree, She'ein Maschilin, you can't begin a Suda. So when do they both agree you can't begin a Suda Samach Lamincha? Nishkach Hazla Erev Pesach. On Erev Pesach, both Rabbi Yosi and Yehuda agree you can't start a Suda Samach Lamincha. El Hadatani, this time we learned in a brisa. Shavin Shemaschilin, they both agree that you're allowed to begin a Suda. Amos. When is that? Inema be'erev Shabbos. If you're going to tell me we're talking about Erev Shabbos, hamiflik pligi. What do they for sure argue? Rabbi Yehuda says ein maschilin, and Rabbi Yosi says maschilin. So what is this brisa talking about? Agav, this was the brisa that we brought as a raya that against the Bahag that Rabbi Yosi holds l'chatchila, you're allowed to start a Suda on Erev Pesach. Samach Lamincha. The Gemara says miflik pligi. They argue about this. So Rabbi Yosi says you're allowed to begin a Suda on Erev Shabbos Samach Lamincha. So what in the world is this brisa talking about? Says the Gemara, Leikasha, kan koidim teisha, kan la'acher teisha. We're talking about on Erev Shabbos. On Erev Shabbos, before 9 hours, everybody agrees that you are maschilin, shavin shemaschilin. And kan la'acher teisha, so that's when they disagree. Okay, nice Gemara. Let's do one more Gemara. Oisam b'nei Adam. This is a new sugya. Okay, this is a sugya that's going to talk about shinoi makam by a bracha, changing your place when you're making a bracha. It's going to talk about Kiddush in shul on Friday night. Okay, and then it gets into the next sugya, which is Kiddush b'makam suda and shinoi makam ba'arichas. That's going to be on Kuf Aleph. But we're really going to talk about making Kiddush in shul on Friday night. Says the Gemara, Oisam b'nei Adam. Those people, shekitshu b'beis hakneses, that made Kiddush in shul. Okay. Amar Rav. Rav says, Yedeyayin lo yatsu. They have not fulfilled, or it doesn't mean they haven't fulfilled, but it means Yedeyayin lo yatsu means that they're going to have to make a Bar Piragafen when they go home. Yedeyayin lo yatsu means that the bracha that they made on the yayin is not going to help them when they go home. But Yidei Kiddush Yatsu, they did fulfill their obligation of Kiddush. Okay, Rav's opinion is Kiddush does not have to be with Makam Suda. So if you heard Kiddush in shul, you fulfilled your mitzvah of Kiddush. Yidei Kiddush Yatsu. Shmuel says, top of Kavalov, af Yidei Kiddush La Yatsu, you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush either, because Shmuel holds Ein Kiddush El B'Makam Suda. You have to make a Kiddush in place of your Suda. Okay. Then the Gemara will go on and discuss why make Kiddush in shul according to both of those. We'll get to that tomorrow, Merz Hashem. Correct. We'll get to that. We will get to that. So what is going on? Why are they making Kiddush in shul? Who makes Kiddush in shul? And how did this come about? So let's start like this. Okay. I was looking for the Taisus over here. Okay, let's go to the Taisus that says Yidei Kiddush, the top Taisus, Yidei Kiddush Yatsu. So Taisus wants to say like this. It's the not Yidei Yain Liyatsu, the Taisus on top of that one. Okay. Let's go through it. That means even if people didn't drink, as long as somebody drank, afilu echad mehem, as long as somebody drinks, so you're yotze. Because the muchach b'seif b'kol ma'arvin, that you don't need everybody to drink to be yotze kiddush. But lechatchila tzarich shita mukulam, everybody should drink the kiddush wine. Okay. The near the halacha kishmul, it seems to me like the halacha follows Shmuel. Damer ein kiddush al makam suda. That depends with the next sugya. The apagav the ba'al halacha karav. Taisus says generally we know the halacha between Rav, when you have machlekes Rav and Shmuel, the halacha follows Rav be'isurim. The guy Rabbi Yochanan several kaman karav. Rabbi Yochanan also agrees to Rav. But halacha is kishmul the Rav Huna v'Rav ba'abaye kulu savri b'samach ein kiddush al makam suda. We'll see in the Gemara later on that all Amoraim agree to Shmuel. V'chein Pasak the Megillah Starim, and therefore, and the Rabbeinu Nissim in his writings, he also paskin that way. Okay. Now, v'hamekadesh shedaiti lechel b'makam acher. Here's one point. What happens if you're making kiddush, but you're planning on eating in a different spot? So I have in mind, I know I'm making kiddush in shul, but I have in mind to go home and eat. Is that good enough? Mekadesh shedaiti lechel b'makam acher. Yachol lahoitzi. So again, he's going to hold that that's not going to work, but he could be maitzi as ha'eichlim sham. If there are people eating in shul, and he's making kiddush for them, that's fine, because for them it's b'makam suda. They do have a makam suda. V'chein mashma mid the midistama esher b'bnei ha'ir hayim mekadesh bebeis hakneses. Who was this guy? Oisam b'nei adam shekidshu. It was probably like the chazan or the gabbai was making kiddush, and who was eating in shul? Umaytzi ha'orchem, the guests who were there. Okay, now comes a sharp line from Taisus. Vehecha deleka orchem. In a place where you don't have guests, samach lebeis hakneses, that are eating in the beis hakneses, ein lekadesh, don't make kiddush. Tehavya bracha livatola, because it's going to be a pointless bracha. The kaimlan kishmuel, because we hold like Shmuel that ein kiddush al makam suda. So if you don't have orchim, don't make kiddush. This is the opinion of Taisus. The Rush says a little lighter. He doesn't say, I don't think he says it's a bracha l'vatala. He says it's like a bracha l'vatala, I think. But it's a bracha l'vatala. What's up with that? It's a bracha l'vatala because you can't make kiddush b'makam suda. The Rush brings Rabbeinu Yoina. Yoina says, I'll tell you what. He says, before I get to Rabbeinu Yoina, I don't understand. How could like is it we're just going to be mavatal this takana? You know what I mean? Of making kiddush in shul. They were doing it for hundreds of years. I don't know, and now we're just not going to stop this. Well, if this is a takana, there was actually the Ran and other Rishonim hold that it's not a bracha levatala, and you should make kiddush in shul. This is the takana that was made, and you should continue. You make kiddush in shul if there are no orchim around anymore, right? Like the bracha we say before Ma'ariv, before Shemona Esrei Ma'ariv. It was a bracha that was instituted for people that are coming late from shul. This was instituted, so we continue making the bracha. So why by kiddush we stop doing this? So the machlekes here, I'm telling you, between Taisus, the Shbam, and other Rishonim. So the Vayakiv, he says over from the staple, two mahalchim in this machlekes. You could understand the machlekes as follows. What happens if I have a takana that Chazal made, and the reason for the takana is void? It doesn't apply anymore. Does that void the takana, or does the takana still remain? Right? So that could be the machlekes between Taisus and the Ran. Taisus is of the opinion that once the reason for the takana is no more, so then the takana is void. And Rabbi the Ran holds no, even if the reason for the takana is void, the takana still remains. One mahalach. Then he says another mahalach. He says it could be maybe the Taisus agrees about it. If you have a takana that was made by Chazal, even if the tam is batal, you don't void the takana. But who says there was such a takana? That's the machlekes. The Ran there was a takana made by Chazal. You got to make kiddush in shul. Maybe it was to make it, the takana was to be Yitzhak Orchim, but they made such a takana. And Taisus says there wasn't a takana that was ever made. It was a practical thing. There are Arachim who came to shul. You had to make Kiddush for them, so you got to make Kiddush for them. But it wasn't a takana ever made. That's the machlokes between Taisus and the Ran. Was this a takana? If the Ola was a takana, of course you keep the takana going, even if the time was bottle. But this was the takana. Even the Lashon Gemara there's Oysam b'nei Adam shekitshu eis. Doesn't sound like this was a takana made. This was like people know what they did because it was a practical thing.
Then they should have made it in shul. They should wait when the Orchim are ready to sit down to eat. They didn't make Kiddush.
If the
Kiddush before, but in the middle of davening.
What was at the end of davening before people went home? So I would hear that they didn't trust the Archim with the wine. I don't know why they wanted to make Kiddush. They ate in shul, so they made Kiddush. B'Reivam Hadras Melech. They ate it. We'll see in a minute. We'll see where they exactly ate. Taisus discusses where exactly they ate. So it's a problem of Shini Makam. They'll discuss that. But this is one idea. Rabbeinu Yoina, he says even if there are no archim in shul, he should still make Kiddush. And he's got a different idea. And I was actually machal into this, Rabbeinu Yoina. I told this to somebody once. So you know why you make Kiddush in shul? Because there are many people, he says, that maybe aren't going to go home and make Kiddush. Right? So you're right, they're not going to have Kiddush Makam Suda. But Kiddush Makam Suda is a Derabanan. At least they'll get the Kiddush Deraisa, the kind of mitzvah Deraisa of Kiddush.
You have the bracha of Kiddush anyway right before. No?
What do you mean?
When you say after Shmon Esrei, after Veichulu, you're making the bracha Mekadesh Shabbos.
Oh, in Shemon Esrei.
No, after Shmon Esrei, the Chazan repeats it.
But in Shemon Esrei, good kasha.
Also Shmon Esrei, fine.
Good kasha. Russia asked the kasha. The maybe Kiveger, maybe somebody asked that kasha. He says, "What do you mean? You're yaitz by davening Shemon Esrei. You're already yaitz Kiddush. There's an old rate, right? How you might see your wife if your wife has a chiv deraisa, you shouldn't have married. You already yaitz mitzvah deraisa. So how's the rabbanim might see deraisa, right? But this is Rabbeinu Yoina. Rabbeinu Yoina says you make Kiddush in shul to be mitzvah people that aren't going to make Kiddush. At least they get their mitzvah deraisa. Rabbi Kiveger asks, yeah, but they're already yaitz the mitzvah deraisa by davening Shemon Esrei. So I tell it, not everybody davening Shemon Esrei in shul.
That's why the Chazan repeats it.
Which is true. What?
Yeah, that's why it comes out.
No, that's what I'm saying. But I'm telling you practically, there are people that don't daven Ma'ariv. They don't say the words of Shemon Esrei. They don't say the words.
But they're in shul.
Correct. I'm just telling you that this is I would say, I'm just venturing to say that practically speaking, it makes sense to say Kiddush and shul because there are people that were Makai the mitzvah deraisa by davening Shemon Esrei. If you hold your yaitz with that, maybe most people probably go home and say Kiddush. Maybe there are people that came that are.
When we think about it, I kind of like one thing. When we think about it in practical consideration, I can't imagine someone who actually goes to shul Friday night and doesn't make it at home. The person who's actually going to go to shul.
What happened?
I don't.
I've been to shuls and I've been many. I don't know. I worked in a shul upstate. I don't know. They had in shul. That was it. So that's what Rabbeinu Yoina Svar is. That's what Rabbeinu says. He says he keeps the takana going. It's not just for Archim. It's to be mighty people that aren't that wouldn't say Kiddush. To be at least look at the deraisa. Now the Rosh argues and he says, yeah, but you're not getting Kiddush Makam Suda. So what's his taina? So Pri Megadim says a very lamdash machlekes here. When Chazal institute a way to do a mitzvah, they give you a nusach habracha. They give you a way to do a mitzvah. Is that now change the way the mitzvah? Does the mitzvah de'oraisa now is now dependent on the way the Chazal Shtalabek instituted the way this mitzvah should be done, or not? It seems like Rabbeinu Yoina holds. Okay, these are beautiful derabbanans that you instituted, but it doesn't. Just because you didn't do that doesn't mean you didn't fulfill your mitzvah de'oraisa. And it could be the Rosh holds, no, that since the Chazal instituted that this is the way you're supposed to do Kiddush, if you don't do it the way we instituted, you're not Yotzi Mitzvah Deraisa. That's a big deal. And to say that they would do such a thing like that. But it seems to be a machlekes Rishonim. And it could be that's a machlekes between Rabbeinu Yoina and the Rosh. Now there's another reason to make Kiddush in shul. This is fascinating. Rav Natrunai. The bottom of that thesis we were learning, if you see 4 lines from the end of the thesis, It says Kosav b'shem Rav Natrunai Gaon. Now you got to understand something that the Gaonim say we take very seriously. Kosav, he says b'tshuvas, mikachin b'beis haknesses. You make kiddush in shul, v'noisin l'teich einav, and you should put the wine in your eyes, l'rafua. It acts as a rafua. Okay, exactly. We do it by Havdalah. Other people say that the Indian is to drink the wine, not just to put it in your eyes. But he says that's why you make kiddush on shul. So you should be able to get this refuah, because Pesiya Gasana tells Acham Mektavkov Ma'ar Einav. A large step could take 500 of your eyesight. The aim is Mahajale. When do you get it back? The Kiddusha de Beishimsha on the Friday night Kiddush. Umiyu Ba'aviyaz because of the refuah. The high refuah matzlam ever b'kiddush b'beis. You can do it at home. You don't have to do this kiddush in shul. If not right, felt this is the reason why you should make kiddush in shul. The Beis Yosef can't understand why would you. That we should this is a reason to make kiddush in shul. This is like the Torah's matmiya. The Gemara says you do it because of archim, not because you do it not to get a refuah. The refuah shal, how you do that? It seems like you hold segulas that you do for refuah hamutah on Shabbos. Yeah. That is, but it's an interesting Rav Natrunai Gaon. I saw also some say that you should look at the neiros. Looking at the neiros bring back your eyesight, because ner plus ner, the two neiros equals 500. So it took 1/500 of your eyesight. So looking at the ner brings back it. I forgot who said it. This is often Dar Yaakov. He brought it from somebody. I don't remember who it was. Okay, let's tell you one other piece here. Okay, who drinks the wine? That's what you brought up. Who should drink the wine? So the best would be if you got orchim there, you give it to one of the orchim to drink the wine. They're being yaitza the kiddush. The makadosh is not yaitza with his kiddush because it's not makim suda. Now there's a Sar Mikutzi, who was one of the Baalei Tosfos, and he says for the wine of kiddush, even if you're not yaitza kiddush, you could drink that wine. You can drink the wine of Kiddush, even though you're not Yaitza Kiddush, but the wine, the bracha you made of Kiddush, you're allowed to drink the wine. Now, what we do is we give it to an Ireach, but we know, everybody knows, the minhag is you make Kiddush in shul, who drinks the wine? Ketanim. So, there's an Isser. You're not allowed to give a kid an Isser. Something that's Usser, you can't give a kid to do. It's called Safina Le Biyadayim. You can't give something, you can't allow and you can't definitely facilitate a child doing an Isser, drinking before Kiddush. They weren't Yaitza Kiddush.
What's the makor for that?
You're not Yaitza Kiddush.
What's the makor that you can't eat or drink before Kiddush? We didn't cover
It's a D'Rabbanan, correct. We'll get to that. There's an Isser to eat before Kiddush, an Isser D'Rabbanan to eat before Kiddush. Once Kiddush comes, once the Shabbos comes, so Shabbos is Kaviyah, is Kaviyah La'atzmai, and it says you can't eat before Kiddush. There's an Isser D'Rabbanan to eat before Kiddush. So how do you give a kid to eat before Kiddush? That's the kasha they ask. I got a few tourism for you.
So we're only in shul.
I'm sorry?
We're only in shul.
Correct. That's how we pass. We pass like Shmuel that ain't Kiddush Makam Suda. So you weren't Yaitza your mitzvah. So who's drinking the wine? You can't drink because you weren't Yaitza. You can give it to an Iraq. We have no harachim. You give it to kids. How can you give it to a kid? As if it only be a dime. One teretz is that halacha only applies to Yisur D'Oraisa. But Yisur D'Rabbanan, there's no halacha of you're allowed to give an Yisur D'Rabbanan to a kid. One teretz. Second teretz is for a katan, you can rely on the Sar Mikusi. There's a Shitas Rishonim that holds that the Kiddush wine itself you're allowed to drink. So even though we don't pass it like that, but for a kid, you could be samech on that. Third teretz. This is an interesting one. In order to save the adult from a bracha levatala, you're allowed to be over an isra and give it to a kid. Interesting one. The last one is the lumdish one. The wine's not usser. You're in a time of isser, right? The halacha of you're not allowed to be masif and lay biyadayim. You can't give an isser to a kid to eat. It's talking about a piece of trait. A chefza shel isser. You can't give something that's isser to a kid. But here the wine is mutter. It's just that this is a time that you're not supposed to. You're at a time where you're not supposed to eat. That doesn't. There's no that the halacha of safin l'biyadayim doesn't apply to the time of Isur, only to a chefza de Isura. If I'm not mistaken, I think there's a similar teretz about Yom Kippur. I think when it comes to Yom Kippur, why you allowed to feed your kids on Yom Kippur? Partially because you got to feed your kids, but they got to eat. But I think that's like alumnus like that also. It's a time of Isur.
Candy to a kid during Friday night during davening.
Correct. So this is interesting. I remember seeing. I have to look it up again. I remember seeing once. I didn't quite. I got to look it up again. That we're not makbar on kids eating before Kiddush. I got to look at it. I'm not saying that. I know it's on record, but it's like a Magen Avraham, if I remember correctly. I thought there was such a thing. Kid wants to eat, let him eat. You can't stop a kid. I mean, that's the difference here. You don't have to stop a kid from eating before Kiddush. The issue of safin lebiyadayim is giving him something. So you're giving him a candy before Kiddush may be an issue. But if you're allowing him to take a candy before Kiddush, he can take what he wants. That's fine. I mean, what? If I'm not mistaken, it's such a Magen Avraham. Yeah, chinuch makes it maybe the age of chinuch, but yeah, once I pour the kids are always you make the kid just make a bracha. You know what I mean? Okay. Maybe not. I don't remember. Okay, Kevra, I'm gonna take a little vote. Does anybody prefer 8:00? No. You prefer 8:00? For 8:00, we take a vote. No. 2, no.
Yeah, a little earlier, but I don't have it.
It's too early. Okay. That's what I'm saying. It's a tumult anyway in the house. So go. Here we go. Sure now. It's a tumult anyway. All right. We'll continue with Shem tomorrow night at 9:00. Thanks for joining, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. See you tomorrow.